Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode, I'm going to address something that happened behind the scenes that you're not really going to know, or you wouldn't know unless I'm telling you this, which I am, so yeah, you're going to know this. Basically, I ended up shifting my plans for the podcast for the end of the year, because I actually did have ideas on what I wanted to do for the end of the year, and I pretty much solidified what they're going to be. But what I recently did was change the order because of something that might be happening this week, which you probably know given the news. I'm not going to talk about it in this episode, but you know what it is. Basically, I realized, if this thing happens, this will determine what this party would do. So it's natural for me to get this out as quickly as I could when I originally planned to do this near the end of the year. Oh yeah, and I also have to say thanks for the 800 subscribers, whatever. Here's to the 800 more I hopefully get. But anyways, let's get right into the news. First, we're going to be talking about something interesting going on with a certain situation that I haven't talked about that much because I didn't really care that much about it. But I guess it's important because some people talk about it. So we'll talk about it. The situation regarding FreeAlexSaab. For those who don't know, FreeAlexSaab is a person who had ties to the Venezuelan government, and basically, he was a businessman who had business ties to them, and he was also going to and for negotiating on behalf of them or something, and the US has arrested him for money laundering, but of course, he's only being tried because of the money laundering for Venezuela. And Venezuela originally denied any indications that they had any relation with him, but as soon as he was arrested, they immediately launched a FreeAlexSaab thing. This happens every 5 minutes. There's a political prisoner that everybody goes we need to free them, and it's even if the jailing is 100% justified, there was the Free Angela campaign. I think Free Angela campaign was the one that started it all. But then it's it's evolved, and now we got people there was the Free Mark Curtis campaign, and it's yikes. We have more justified ones like Free Mumia or Free Peltier. But back to FreeAlexSaab, Venezuela has been doing everything they could to try and make sure that this issue is brought to their attention, and that he's extradited back to Venezuela, back to them. And this has been going on for 2 years since his arrest. But as the AP points out, the campaign to win the release of FreeAlexSaab Moran suffered a blow Monday when U.S. prosecutors introduced documents casting down on defensive evidence underlying his claim of diplomatic immunity from prosecution. The prosecutors replied to Saab's motion to dismiss a criminal indictment out of Miami money laundering, raises questions about the time and manner in which President Nicolas Maduro purportedly appointed Saab as a government convoy. So basically, what they are saying is that Saab was affiliated with the government of Venezuela, so he couldn't be tried for a specific action that he did. But apparently, they're saying that the documents that Saab had that proved that he was an envoy for Venezuela was actually a forgery, proving that he had no affiliation with the Venezuelan government, outside of probably business relations. I only talked about it because it was kind of a slow news week outside of what the main topic is going to be, but again, I think it is interesting just to see this one, because it's we need to show that there are some times where the free blank people cases are just not that known or that well cared. Because I saw some people tweeting FreeAlexSaab, and I'm who is this person? I'm pretty sure we're just getting a bunch of bumper, it's pretty much the lefty stereotype, just acquiring a bunch of bumper stickers of free whoever. But anyways, the next story is a controversial thing, at least for this channel, because this might determine what happens next for my standing. Okay, so Chuy Garcia, the Illinois Progressive champion, has just announced that he will be running for mayor of Chicago. Coming exactly, he announced exactly 2 days after he was reelected to the House. And, I said point blank, when this happened, I got, a ton of shit for this, and it's, coming from me, the biggest Chuy stan of them all. I called out the fact that this was like one of the dumbest decisions Chuy could make for a plethora of reasons. Chuy, like, it is not that far away from the election. The election is on the 28th of February of next year. He does not have that much time to campaign. That's why we had a bunch of people announcing, like, way earlier. 2, he is one of the latest candidates in a very crowded field, which already has quite a few progressive candidates. 3, he's throwing away his House seat. Now, many people argue he's technically able to keep his House seat while he's running for mayor, but I think that's a douchey move. 4, this comes literally 2 days after they elected him to this House seat. Again, this comes off more as a douchey move rather than like a political move, but this can strike as a political move because, like, that's what many people argued against Jumaine Williams running for governor because, like, we just elected him to his term. Why should we elect him for this gubernatorial election? And lastly, number 5 ties all the previous ones together in one neat bow. Since the field is crowded, since he took so long, since he was actively campaigning for re-election, Chuy's base for a mayoral run is essentially gone. Like, everybody assumed that Chuy was not going to run for mayor, so they all fled to other candidates. And one of the big things, like, there are a lot of people who would argue against it. Like, Garcia gave a run for his money. Like, Garcia made Rahm Emanuel very scared of re-election due to his 2015 bid. And it's like, you want to know how he got to that level of his 2015 bid? He got help and support from the Chicago Teachers Union. The Chicago Teachers Union and many progressive figures within his city are currently backing Brandon Johnson. And Johnson has made it very abundantly clear that he will not withdraw from the race for Chuy Garcia. And the Chicago Teachers Union has made it abundantly clear that they will not be rescinding their endorsement of Johnson just because Garcia wants to be mayor. They made it abundantly clear that he should have made this decision long before. And Garcia's trying to make it abundantly clear, like, oh, okay, fine, I'll go it alone if I have to. It's like, buddy, yeah, that's the problem. Like, this is the problem. You can't go it alone. Chuy, you can't go alone. This coalition is what led you to be in a position to beat Rahm Emanuel. That's why people wanted you to run for mayor, basically the second you got into Congress back in 2019. That's why people were trying to get you to run for mayor long before Brandon Johnson even remotely considered running for mayor. But, like, again, I am the biggest Chuy stan of them all, and I'm acknowledging all of these things. And it seems a lot of people in his area are very much mad at Chuy Garcia running for mayor. Like, a lot of his base, who loved Chuy to begin with, are at the point where they're literally mad at him for running in this race. One of their biggest points of attack is the fact that Chuy Garcia endorsed Lori Lightfoot, but now he's entering the scene to be like, I'm going to be one of your biggest opponents. And it's like, Chuy, buddy, pal, it would have been more useful if you stayed within the United States Congress and then pushed your momentum into making sure that the Chicago mayoral candidate best suited your values. And I think this might actually come from a bit of a personal thing for Chuy and many of his supporters. Many people argue, like, okay, Chuy helped get Lori Lightfoot into the Chicago mayoral race. Like, she is Chicago mayor, mostly thanks to Chuy's endorsement in the second round. So maybe he feels a personal vendetta. Like, he feels at fault for putting her in that position, so he's the only one who could take her out. But I think it would have been way more better if Chuy, instead of giving, like, a half-hearted endorsement in the second round, he maybe should have instead been one of the fiercest campaigners for one of the progressive candidates in the first round, thus guaranteeing that the progressive vote is united behind one singular figure. But instead, Chuy Garcia has entered into the field with the intention of pushing for himself as that candidate. Now, this can be good. Like, maybe this does just work out in the general, and Chuy does manage to become mayor. Great. Wonderful. Absolutely amazing. But I don't necessarily think that that is what is going to happen. This might just end up furthering divides within the Chicago progressive movement. And I think this leads into one more problem that we might have to arise with. The idea that, hypothetically, if Chuy wins, if Chuy Garcia wins, what the heck do we do with his House seat? Because I think we're starting to see inklings of a potential idea that didn't end up following suit. Like, it didn't end up happening, but might end up becoming like a little bit of a reverse of what was going to happen. You see, basically, here's what happened. Back in 2018, Luis Gutierrez, the incumbent member of Illinois District 4, announced that he was going to retire from Congress. And very soon afterwards, he announced that he would be endorsing Chuy Garcia for the seat when Chuy entered the scene. Now, one of the reasons why Luis Gutierrez dropped out and didn't want to run was many people were seeing that he might have been gearing up for a potential run for Chicago mayor. However, that didn't end up happening, and instead we got like Lori Lightfoot instead. However, Luis Gutierrez made himself very publicly there for Chuy Garcia's mayoral announcement. So what I'm thinking is happening is that him and Chuy are maybe working behind the scenes to potentially get Luis Gutierrez back in his seat. He backs Chuy for mayor. Chuy makes no problems in endorsing Gutierrez. Though there may also be potential for Marie Newman to enter the scene and run in that district, or maybe Carlos Rodriguez Rosa might run. But again, that's really in the hypothetical scenario that Chuy wins. Last news story is kind of related to what will be next week's topic, but also is sort of related to this topic, obviously. But okay, let's just get into it. Roots Action has officially unveiled their DontRunJoe campaign. If you don't know, Roots Action is a progressive organization, and as you can tell by the name, DontRunJoe is the idea that they're trying to make sure that Joe Biden does not run for re-election in 2024, specifically hearkening on Joe Biden's low approval rating and needing solid leadership to take down Republicans in 2024. And they're starting to put their focus in New Hampshire, first state of the union, I think. I don't remember if that Nevada thing ended up happening, but as you know, that they're trying to make Nevada the first state in the union to do presidential campaigns and caucuses, but I don't know if that actually has ended up happening yet. So they're focusing on New Hampshire. Like, everybody is trying to do the thing because we're looking back to previous presidential elections to try and cite potential ideas for like future runs. Like, one of the things that this is harkening back to like 1952 and 1968. I think it's more like 68. Where they pushed for this, where Eugene McCarthy pushed really hard in New Hampshire, and due to his results, it caused Lyndon B. Johnson to announce that he would not be running for another term, and they're trying to harken back to that in order to make sure that Joe Biden doesn't run for another term. And as you can probably guess, I don't want Joe Biden to run for another term, because vague predictions, like, generally, at this point, we're all kind of like throwing crap at the wall to see what sticks. But general consensus has it like this. If it's Biden v. Trump, we could technically see it going either way, but many people would probably put it in Trump's favor. If it's Biden v. any other Republican, then any other Republican might stand a chance. But if it's any other Republican versus any other Democrat, then Democrats might also have a chance. But if it's any other Democrat versus Trump, then again, any other Democrat might have a chance. People are trying to hedge their bets on any other Democrat, like people who don't have Joe Biden's baggage, would probably have a better shot in 2024 against whoever the GOP chooses to nominate, rather than, whatever. And the GOP is also harkening on that as well. They're trying desperately to try to make sure that Trump doesn't run for another term, because Trump has all that baggage. And even though we might think that Trump might have a chance, given America's like amnesic mindset in regards to presidential elections, the GOP really does not want to take that risk. And Democrats really don't think that they can hedge their bets on Joe Biden anymore. But that kind of analysis is going to be a little bit in the future. Now we're going to have to celebrate our 800 subscribers with a Q&A. Not that many people, decent number of questions, Generally, I would like more of you to give me questions. At one point, I would like to have the full topic be the Q&A, but, whatever. Okay, so let's just get into it. The first question is from Faunus. What is your favorite Mexican political figure? Now, it would kind of depend on what your, like what is a political figure? Like, for most people, a political figure might just be politician, but then you might also want to expand it to other people who are generally in the political scene. AMLO's probably a big one for me, but, you know, if I wanted to truly say, like, favorites just for 100% to probably not get canceled, because I have a lot of Mexican family members that aren't necessarily too much fans of AMLO, I would have to say generally it's a two-way tie between Emiliano Zapata and Lázaro Cárdenas. Maybe with figures like AMLO and, what's the other guy? Benito Juárez becoming, like, close, because it's like they have, like, faults and, like, praise. Mostly Benito Juárez's faults is the fact that he didn't really do much. He's more of a symbol rather than a person. Okay, so next question comes from Alex Kawa. What is the best alternative voting system? Ranked choice voting, approval, star, etc. Or do you believe different ones are better for different types of elections? I'll just be upfront, one of the big things is, like, star voting is really stupid. I really don't think it's that, like I get the idea behind it. It's basically ranked choice voting, but, like, worse. Like, I mean, we live in a country where ranked choice voting is considered hard, like, very hard to grasp and understand. After Sarah Palin lost, she's literally just like, the election was rigged against me. How could the Mary Peltola have won? So I really don't think we can do much beyond ranked choice voting. I will concede the idea of, like, approval voting might be good for, like, the municipal level, but granted, most municipal places technically have that already, with the idea of, like, choose to. And this isn't necessarily a voting system, but also I would generally like the idea of, like, introducing at least some level of proportional representation within the United States. At least on the, like, level of, like, Mexico, where they have, like, some seats that are awarded proportionally, some seats that are, like, maybe we can have it so, like, the House is rewarded proportionally, and then maybe at the Senate level we have ranked choice voting, you know, keeping up with the, but that's sort of like keeping up with the, like, traditionalists of the U.S. Constitution, where it's like, oh, the Senate is supposed to be the moderates, and, like, the House is for the radicals. At least that's how my poli-sci teacher described it. Next question is from Charlemagne7. Which 2023 national elections are you the most interested in? Well, very simply, Finland, Paraguay, Guatemala, Argentina, and Spain. Those are the ones that I'm going to be dedicating a full podcast talking about, because I looked into each of those countries and saw some potential hopes for those areas, or at the very least something interesting to talk about. The only other one that I might also be interested in talking about is Myanmar, but I really don't know what the heck is going to go on at the Myanmar election, because if you remember, Myanmar is currently under a military dictatorship, so, I mean, I don't necessarily know if the elections are going to be free, fair, and whatever, but I would really only want to talk about it just so I could talk about the Myanmar situation a lot more. And, like, there are other elections around the world that might be interesting to look at, but, I mean, I don't know much about them, and I don't want to do all the research in doing it. Essentially, I'm really only interested in, like, the Latin American and European elections. Big sorry to Africa. There's just really is not many African political systems that are that notable. Most of the areas are already predetermined to go one specific party or another. Dalton asks, what are your 5 most favorite films? Now, I actually prepared for this, like, before I even knew this was going to be a question, because I'm kind of like a film guy. Like, I at least used to be, to a degree. Well, I still am to a degree, but basically, I had, like, a bunch of, like, films that I just put in a bunch of, like a Google Doc, like, favorite films in no particular order. Not all of them are, like, that good. They're just ones that I really like. And I usually try not to be that predictable in regards to certain things. Like, it's like some people, they could make all of their favorite films, like, superhero films. Or all their favorite films could be, like, foreign dramas or whatever. Or maybe all their favorite films are like an adaptation of a TV show that you have to watch the show to kind of understand the movie. So I try to account for all of that before I actually... But generally, the 5 ones that I would choose would have to be these. Number 5, A Silent Voice. It was so good that I actually have an episode of my podcast where I literally spent like the first minute or 2 rambling about how good this movie is. It was legitimately so good that literally if I start explaining the plot, then I might not be able to stop. It's an anime movie from Japan that tells the story of Shoya Ishida, a high school student that used to bully a deaf girl by the name of Shoko Nishimiya back when they were like in elementary school. However, one day he meets her once more and tries to make amends for all the bullying that he gave her. Now, ironically, one of the things I complain about animation, and anime in particular, is the idea that why would I watch something that is super realistic when you should use this medium to try and make, do more, do something, big or dramatic, something that can't happen in real life. But funnily enough, this one does it really well. So much it surpasses all of the anime films that do a lot of the big epic anime stuff. Number 4, 12 Angry Men, the 1957 version. It had a remake in the 90s that is also kind of good, but the 50s version is just better. It's a courtroom drama telling the story of a jury that has to decide whether or not a person gets the death penalty or not. 11 jurors say he's guilty, but 1 juror says he's innocent. And he has to do everything in his power to convince every other juror to change his vote. Otherwise, they have to give it to another jury who will more than likely vote to kill him. It's a character study and a good way to analyze how debates should work. There was a YouTuber that literally used this movie to try and explain how to win and lose a debate. And it's really good because you get to feel and know a lot about these characters, even though you also know nothing about them. You just know their personalities and nothing more. Number 3, to get back in somewhat nerdiness, Shrek 2. I should reiterate again, this is technically in no particular order. The numbers are just to tell you that there are numbers. Shrek 2, if the fact that it's a sequel and not the original should probably give an indication. Most people agree that Shrek 2 is better than Shrek 1, and it's just because it takes the concept of the original and expands it to be a lot more than what it originally was, even to a point where it technically kickstarted Shrek from being this sort of fringe indie-ish type thing to being a mainstream pop culture icon. Number 2, one that I got a recent relove of, was 1 Hour Photo. I remember seeing it once when I was a kid, and I just didn't remember anything about it, and then I saw it on the free streaming service Tubi at one point. I don't know if it's still on there, but I saw it and I'm like, does it work? And I rewatched it and it's this works amazing. This is one of the, it's really, really good because it's just one of the things that makes it hard to describe is just Robin Williams plays a dramatic role. That's a thing that you normally don't think of, but Robin Williams pulls it off really well, which seems to be a common thing. Most people say a comedic actor is great in a dramatic role, and Robin Williams not only is able to do that, but the character he plays is incredibly creepy, incredibly dark, and it's it just goes so well. The plot of it is that he plays a character by the name of Chuy, who works in a 1 Hour Photo place. This was back when those were still a thing. And he becomes increasingly fascinated with one particular family, and we get to see how that plays out in this world. And lastly, the only one that probably is in any order is number 1, Return of the Jedi. It's the classic nerdy thing that I love, so it's just naturally going to be up there. It'll probably stay there forever. The next questions come from Sunflower Socialist. Do you believe in Bigfoot? No. At least not in the way, obviously, most people probably believe in it now. I guess technically I remember watching the thing where it's oh, Bigfoot technically exists in the Gigantopithecus, the guy, one of our ancestral people in evolution, but in the real sense of modern day, Bigfoot, no, doesn't exist. What's a position on a hot button issue that you once held, but you have changed your views on in the last year or so? Now, when I originally read this, I didn't even think that I had any, but then upon looking back at it, I'm like, oh yeah, obviously this is a big one that obviously happened. It was 100%, I don't remember if it was literally the last year or so. But the first one I'll say is just the general idea of me shifting from quote unquote social democracy to being a socialist. It's but that's really not much. I was basically a socialist in hiding. But I guess truly in the sense of being truly post-capitalist, I guess, is one. but one on a particular hot button issue would basically be vaccinations. Like very early on, you can look at old quizzes, like when I took political compass quizzes or whatever, when I would get to the vaccination question, I would say, I generally believe that people shouldn't be forced to have vaccines. They should have the option to choose vaccines. But now at this point, I'm literally just like, yeah, force everybody to take vaccines. Everybody should be mandatorily vaccinated, held against their will, like held down on their bed while they're screaming and agony, like, no, please don't give me vaccine. And we inject it into them. The fact that the majority of the population was like super ill-informed on the COVID vaccine just very greatly made me realize, yeah, just no thanks. We need to just make this completely mandatory. I don't care. The next questions come from Cerebus is God. Best mayor ever in your opinion? Come back to this channel in 1 year and you'll figure it out. What would you do with a $1 billion inheritance? First, I'd go to the immediate family and then like make sure that everything is like paid off, like cars, houses, whatever, and like completely paid off so that they don't have to worry about that anymore. Give some to my mother and be like, you know, you don't have to work anymore. I would then buy my own place and my own car and pay it off, and then set off like a decent amount, like enough that I can like buy groceries for like a little bit or like whatever, and then give the rest to political organizations or nonprofits, direct action, like whatever is in the immediate thing, like pay that off. Maybe put some into like environmentally conscious forms of energy, you know, whatever. And maybe set off just enough that I can like hypothetically like pay for like a immediate emergency. Like, you know, like if an immediate like friend or family member is like, hey, I have like this surgery or whatever that I need fixed. Like that's the only reason that I could logistically want to have like a lot of money. Just the idea of having a lot of money just so I could go up to somebody who like literally needs like a certain amount of money that's like just big enough that they can't afford it, like just out of their reach, and then just be like, no, I can just give you that. And since I'd have a lot of money in this scenario, I wouldn't have to, I'm not even gonna worry about like the whole like, because it's one thing that kind of like is BS, just like the idea of like, oh yeah, and a loan, because like, people are just too scared to like just ask for help. But I'll never have to worry about that ever. So yeah, go to charities? No. Favorite chairman of the CCP, living or dead? Now here's the thing with that question. It's actually a trick question because there aren't that many people who were chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. The only people who were defined under the title of chairman of the Communist Party are Mao and like 3 or 4 random people who were basically there as like a transitionary period before we got to the general secretary taking over as leader. So I guess technically under this scenario, I have to choose Mao Zedong. Now, even if we expanded that upon, like, okay, let's just say, like, when they say, like, chairman of the Communist Party of China, we mean, like, just leader of the Chinese Communist Party. It would still have to probably be Mao. Because, let's be real, who's his competition? Deng Xiaoping? Xi Jinping? Pfft, those 5 random people that I mentioned before? Like, again, there really is not that much competition. Criticize him all you want, and I definitely have, but acknowledge that Mao, like, a lot of his faults really did seem to come from, like, just first the general failed idea of, like dictatorship of the proletariat, and just the fact that he was just a little bit difficult to manage certain things. Who did you vote for in the midterms, and why? On the top of the ticket, I voted for Matthew Ho for Senate, and the reason being is that Cherry Beasley is a very bad candidate, and I very much made it abundantly clear that I would not vote for Cherry Beasley. Now, I know that there's some people in my audience that are probably going to type away and be like, you're spoiling the election. Look at the results that Cherry Beasley had. I basically came to this conclusion in 2020 that I came to in 2022. I basically said, Cherry Beasley's either going to win without my support or lose without my support. There is no scenario where my support guarantees a Beasley win. And for the rest of the candidates, I mostly just voted Democrat down the ballot. Like, I'm not one of those guys that are going to be like, I vote for Ho on the top of the ticket, and then down the ballot, I'm going to write in Lenin. I literally just hate those people. They're, like, generally really annoying. They don't understand that these down the ballot races are, like, very important. And it's very much crucial that you should be voting for like legitimate people in these races, even if it's like very small amounts of understanding. At the very least, you should be voting in those down the ballot races. Next is questions from Nicholas Zand. Have you ever had steamed hams? Technically, yes. Are you the real How To Basic? Nope. Wink, wink. What do you do with a drunken sailor? You throw him overboard, of course. Watch him drown. Did DeMint really start the recession? No, you did. And his only serious question, have you ever tried dating someone with the opposing political views? If so, how did it go? I thought you said this would be a serious question. No, but I have actually made parameters in this particular situation. Like, while I would very much like to be within my own, like, political sphere, I do have, like, certain levels of, like, leniency. Like, I could hypothetically date a liberal. I could hypothetically date even a libertarian. Or maybe, even to a degree, a moderate conservative. The one big thing for me is that you really cannot compromise on the social issues. Now, of course, economic issues are a very big thing politically, but for people-to-people contact, truly, social issues are what reign supreme. Why do you think the Republican Party runs very hard to the social issues? Because social issues are the things that propel most people to get personal and moral. Most people's deepest moral barometers really do stick to the social issues. And that really is something that I just cannot compromise. But they also have to be willing to talk about politics. Like, it's one big thing that I do kind of hate. Like, just the idea of, like, oh, you're dating someone, so, like, we need to avoid certain subjects to be taboo. It's like, that's the whole point of dating people. Aren't you supposed to be dating people? Dating people is basically, like, practice for marriage. Now, I know many people will probably say, like, no, it's actually not. It is. With dating, you truly have to accept a possibility that you might be spending the rest of your life with this person. Now, of course, if you go into a relationship with that in mind, like, I'm dating this person exclusive so I can spend the rest of my life with them, that's kind of creepy. But you have to be okay with that potential scenario. Otherwise, why the heck are you dating them? But yeah, essentially, they have to be super left-wing on social issues. Or at the very least, center-left on social issues. Economic issues, it can technically work, maybe, but I don't think it will. Especially since I've gotten, like, a bit more radicalized. Daniel Sabelos, what is your most preferred voting system? Ranked choice, first past the post, star, etc. Already answered that. Who do you think will be the new face of the progressive electoral movement after Bernie? Logistically, there's only one option. We all know who it is, so there's really no point in me saying who she is. What would you say is the most a single person can make for you to still believe that they could have earned it through non-exploitative means? Example, someone who's worth $2 million versus $2 billion would both claim that they earned it without exploitation. Now, the thing is, it's not necessarily how much they earn, but rather how they earn it. In order for it to truly be exploitative, there has to be exploitation. Like, hypothetically, if a worker they toil every day of their life, and they are able to somehow manage to get by with only, like, a fraction of their money, and they save a lot of it for later, technically, at one point, they could be worth, like, $1 million or billions of dollars if they work hard enough, hypothetically. Like, logistically, the latter is not likely. But again, hypothetically, they could be. The reason why socialists call billionaires exploitative, it's not because they have billions of dollars. It's not the monetary value. It's because in order to acquire that monetary value, you have to exploit people. So again, it's not the monetary value, it's how they acquire it. And we don't have a model where a worker is not exploited to a degree where we can actually measure how much they could actually make if they were not exploited, so we can't measure that value. I'm pretty sure there is some way to do that and analyze that, but I can't really figure out the way to do that. Had Bernie won in 2016, do you think he would have had a successful presidency? it's gonna be hard to measure because it's like Bernie and Trump winning when in their hypothetical worlds, like in the real world and the hypothetical world, like their wins and whatever is what caused certain electoral shifts. Like if Bernie won, would that win have also been acquired with a like huge progressive wave and democratic socialist wave? Would the squad have come earlier than expected? Or are we judging it based on the actual House outlook at the time period? Because that would give you very different answers. In his first years, maybe not so much if the houses were still in the control of the Republicans, but maybe in the latter 2 years, he might have had like a build up and like a revamp, and then he could have run on 2020 in the idea of like, I will expand my platform to be like a lot more like hardline left wing than before, and then maybe that could lead into a better presidency. But again, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't really know. We don't know, and it doesn't really matter because that's a hypothetical scenario that truly will never happen. And the last question is, do you see yourself still making videos on this channel in the next 5 years? Well, maybe if some of you actually were able to subscribe to me on Patreon, I could. Or maybe if one of those big channels that keeps following me manages to give me an actual big break for once, instead of just reacting to the same old Bill Maher clips over and over and over again, maybe I would be able to. Maybe if you guys kept interacting with my content and shared it more and made sure more people were getting into this channel, I sure as hell could be. Maybe if one of my many Twitter followers actually somehow knew that I was making content on YouTube, even though I talk about it relentlessly on my Twitter, maybe I could. I sure would like to. I sure as heck have been trying. Logistically, the only thing stopping me is death or deletion. Like literally, if I go radio silent one day on this channel, I'm 100% dead. There will be no ifs, ands, or buts. Nobody will have to try and reach out to me in private to be like, did you silently quit the channel? No. There is no quitting. Even if I'm stuck in like crappy hotel room for the rest of my life working as like a minimum wage slave, you'll still be getting content coming on this channel. And since I'm a socialist, I knew that type of commitment wouldn't be rewarded, yet I'm still surprised that it isn't. Anyways, that rant aside, now let's move on to the main topic of this video. We're going to be talking about the 2022 midterms. Now, I should be upfront with one thing. As I'm recording this, the final results have technically not come in yet. But we're at a point where it's essentially not that far off from how the results will end up playing out. Like, most of the races have been called at this point, and while technically final results haven't come in for every race, even the ones that have been called, it's basically like a formality at this point. Like, we know what certain races are going to be, and we have very little surprises coming in. So we're going to get the breakdown of how did each party do, and how did specific like factions of the parties do, and whatever. First, let's just go over the biggest generalizations in regards to predictions. Generally, I was pretty near the mark. Now, when I say pretty near the mark, what I mean is like the numbers were usually not that far off from how things actually panned out. The exception would probably be like specific areas. Like maybe I predicted like one house seat would go blue when it actually went red, or vice versa. And like instead of like 187 for one party, it's instead 186. But like again, generally I was on the mark. Basically, like what it really comes down to, like, when we do predictions, truthfully, I really don't care about the number, like the exact numbers. Like, I mean, unless I'm actually like getting it right 100% on the mark, I really don't care. Like when I do a prediction of like the house will go blue or the house will go red, like I actually tried to refrain from giving like exact number predictions very early on in my channel, just because I knew that I would eventually just be proven wrong. Like I wouldn't get it exactly right. And yeah, I didn't get it exactly right. But again, the general numbers are the same. But maybe specific areas I was like different. Like one of the biggest ones was a big shock in the sense that Nevada might actually go red for both areas. Now, I did get one thing right. I basically said that if Nevada went blue, it would go blue for governor and Senate. But it's currently veering red, so it's probably going to be red for both rather than blue for both. But it's still a little too close to call. And from what I've read, it's generally the areas that are more likely to vote for the Democrats that are still going to be counted. So maybe this might be the last-ditch effort for Democrats to win Nevada. And Democrats are still very much holding on to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they might actually win the House. I still think that that's kind of far off, because I've been looking into it, because like the one House thingy, like when you look up 2022 midterm results, it really just is not that good, in the sense that unless it is fully like called, they won't put the number up. And I think they should at the very least put numbers up for like leanings for the time being, because even though it'll lead to like funky results, because I was like so confused, because I was like, it says 48, but when I put these exact results into the map that I made for that video, it doesn't say that results. It says 49 for Republicans. So what's going on? And it turns out it's because they haven't called Alaska yet, because it's Murkowski versus Kelly Toshiba, or whatever her name is. But the thing is, it doesn't matter, because they're both Republicans. So it's like, this should be called for the Republicans, but not called for a specific candidate yet. Now here's some things that most people aren't talking about. Extremely down the ballot races, because those actually had some interesting things. For starters, Kenneth Mejia it actually seems like Kenneth Mejia might actually win. Like, I think technically it's in that area where it's like, again, it's still technically not called, but it's essentially a done deal for Mejia, which, yeah, surprising. Maybe Kenneth will actually be able to get into a good position for like a future run. And sadly, Greens can't take credit, because Kenneth Mejia did this as a Democrat, so that stinks. And the next local race that I think is interesting is all the stuff that happened in Raleigh. You see, because like one interesting thing that happened with the Raleigh race was that all the Raleigh races were technically like pushed to another year, because the incumbent mayor, Mary Ann Baldwin, did a really weird thing. Like, she passed a law that stated that the mayor race would now be moved to coincide with the midterms, or at the very least it would be made to coincide with national elections. Now, it seemed like it kind of seems like a done deal, because like her logic was this would increase voter turnout, but it was also like a little bit of a sneaky ploy, because it technically extended her term by 1 year. And many people were very mad at this. And they've just been generally mad at a lot of the Raleigh City Council, because they came in with the idea of like, we're these big progressive reformers, but in actuality, they've essentially just become like, you know, like the liberal in the literal worst sense. And this ploy might have actually backfired for her, because it did, to be fair, it did increase voter turnout, to the point where many people were actually considering the fact that maybe the entire Raleigh City Council might actually be up for grabs. But there really was not any big surprises. For the governor's races, a big shock was that Oregon actually managed to stay blue. And it seems for those like southern west like governorships, I guess got like Arizona and Nevada mixed, because it looks like Arizona's shifting blue, but Nevada's shifting red. So that was a big weird. And also, like, Oklahoma didn't get a last minute surprise. Big shock, but another big shock was that Tony Evers actually managed to skim by the nails of his, like by the skin of his, whatever the term is. I don't remember what the term is. You know the term I'm talking about, right? You know, like the skin on his back, or like the hairs on his back? That's the term, I think. Senate, again, I very generally got it right. The only thing that could be wrong is like maybe like slight areas I got wrong. Like Ohio sadly didn't get a big last minute surprise, and Wisconsin sadly didn't end up making a good impact. One interesting thing happened in Louisiana, where Gary Chambers got second. Granted, his second was like 17% to the 61% that the Republican got, but again, it was way more than the official quote-unquote Democratic nominee. I say official in air quotes because the party actually technically wanted to endorse Gary, but white people in Louisiana were a bit like, we're a little scared of having a black man in charge of our party, so they wanted to so they basically like pulled a BS move that I did very early on and gave like a try endorsement. And one thing that I was glad that I was 100% vindicated on was the fact that Fetterman was very easily winning, and Beasley very easily lost. Like, a lot of people were still, like, hedging their bets. Like, oh, Beasley could actually pull off a last-minute surprise. Like, guys, Beasley 100% is a loser. Like, Sherry Beasley is literally the biggest loser of the Democratic Party. I don't even think she got that much close. Like, it was like a pretty decent margin between her and Ted Budd. And I very much predicted that that was going to be the case. Like, I was literally just putting North Carolina in safe red because I didn't think Sherry Beasley had the ability to pull it off. And sure enough, she didn't. Now, if we do the math right now and put all the states that have been called, we have 47, 2, and 49. 47 Democrats, 2 independents, and 49 Republicans. Now, as we all know, the 2 independents caucus with the Democrats, so it's technically just 49-49. There are 2 seats remaining in contention: Nevada, which has not yet been called, and Georgia, which is going to a runoff. I'll be incredibly blunt. I completely forgot that Georgia's elections even had a runoff for regularly scheduled elections. I remembered the runoff with the last election, but I somehow missed the part where it was happening for the normal election. Like, I knew at the time, of course, it was going to be Ossoff and Warnock running in the runoffs, but for some reason, when it was coming on now, I just assumed that it was like only for the special election that the runoffs were a thing. But now I remember, of course, the runoffs were for every race, that it wasn't a 50%. Now, just to be blunt, if I had to make predictions, Nevada, from the way it's looking right now, I would give it to the Republicans. But remember, as I said, the areas that are still left to be counted are apparently in the Democratic-leaning areas. So maybe this could be a pull-off for the Democrats. And Georgia, I will have to just generally say I think the Democrats are going to take Georgia as well. Now, I saw some people argue that the Libertarian is no longer in the race, so technically it might give the edge to the Republicans, but that's exactly what happened in the Ossoff race. There was a Libertarian in the race, and in the runoff, he won, and not the Republican. Plus, Warnock is the one that is the more charismatic candidate. Like, I legitimately believe that Warnock was the reason that Georgia flipped blue in the first place. Well, one of the major reasons. So I think Warnock's going to be fine there. So, from the looks of it, it might actually be, like, again, a very close margin than what I said. Closer than what I thought. I was predicting 52 for Democrats, but it seems like it might just be like a slim 51 majority. Though a lot of people are also expecting that it might just be a 50-50 race again. But again, absolute worst case scenario, Democrats screw up both of these races. But I'd say that 51's probably the most likely, but that's just me being probably a little bit generous. Now, one place that I will not be generous is in the House. One big thing that happened is that the Democrats did way better than most people thought. You see, most people legitimately believed that this would be an extreme wipeout. I don't know why. But apparently everybody was saying that the pundits and everyone was like saying that this race would be a lot more close. Like, this would be like a huge red tsunami. And that's one of the big things that many people said, like, this will be a red tsunami. But I was like, literally anybody who thought that is just completely stupid. I knew for a fact that it was going to be a really close chamber. Like, I still thought that it would be a Republican win, and I still think it might be a Republican win, but it will be a slim one. It might even be a slimmer win than I thought, because I was looking into it, and it was like, technically, if the leads hold, then it might be like a 215 for Democrats. So they might have a very big margin. Like, and again, like, areas that I predicted would go certain ways actually didn't go certain ways. But there were some areas that I actually did predict would go blue that I was like, oh, they actually went blue. Biggest surprise was technically, well, not even a surprise, because again, I predicted it, but Wiley Nickel. But again, Wiley was more of a long shot, to be honest. But one of the biggest losers of the night really seemed to be New York Democrats, because there were a lot of swing seats for New York Democrats that they were very much doing well in, but come election day, they didn't do so well in. one of those seats actually happens to be Sean Patrick Maloney, well actually Mondaire Jones's seat, who is going around trying to blame progressives for him losing his seat. Which doesn't make any sense considering AOC immediately brought up to the attention that she was asked by Sean Patrick Maloney to appear at basically every campaign stop they wanted, and she obliged because she wasn't stupid. And most people are bringing a lot of attention to certain races. Like, many people are trying to explain why did certain people lose when certain people won. Like, first we'll start with some Democrats. Like, why did the Democrats lose in certain areas? One of the biggest things that I saw was that Nina Turner pointed out, like, this thing where it was, like, one specific Democrat, like, congressional candidate in New Jersey, I believe. He was, like, the only Democrat swing state person who lost, and he also happened to be one of the fiercest opponents to the Joe Biden student loan forgiveness program, and the Nevada senator, who is currently not doing so hot in the results, but might pull off a surprise. She is also one of the people who was, like, critical of this move. So many people are saying, maybe the fact that you're approaching Gen Z in this way is what's causing you to lose. And that is one of the biggest things that is a takeaway from election night. Gen Z is the deciding factor. Because exit polls and everybody has shown that Gen Zers are voted overwhelmingly to support the Democrats. And, you know, people are saying, and, like, Republicans took this very well. And by that I mean they're advocating for Gen Z to not be able to vote. But again, focusing on Republicans, why did Republicans not do so hot? Because a lot of people, everybody seemed to be thinking that this would be a big Republican lead. And I'm like, you guys are fucking stupid. But let's see, why did the Republicans not do so hot? Well, one of the biggest things that many people argued is the reason why the GOP did not do so hot. Again, Gen Z. But basically, it all stems from the fact that the GOP veered too far right. That's why a lot of people didn't even, like, bother looking at the polls this election. They were saying, like, this election was too hard to poll because the GOP of this election is a vastly different GOP than the one of the last election. The GOP of this election was literally arguing we should overturn election results and running to a crowd that literally wanted to bomb children's hospitals because the children were gay. I even saw this good video of, like, this of CNN and, like, these news anchors where they're just, like, saying, they basically said, maybe the GOP's strategy of bullying a bunch of minors was not a good idea. And of course, me saying that the GOP veering too far to the right is what's leading them to fail, of course, is just a longer way of saying Trump is the reason why they failed. The fact that they ran to the Trump crowd is truly what caused the election to not go their way. If this were any other race, any other time period, then the GOP might have done better. But this was not their year because they literally ran to the Trump crowd. This might be the year where they officially learn that the Trump crowd cannot help them anymore. Like, 2020 was supposed to be the one where they figured it out, but this is probably one where the GOP's learning, maybe truly this basically neo-fascist crowd will not help us in the general election. I mean, I said this with certain races. I was like, if the GOP had nominated literally anybody else in New Hampshire, then maybe the race would have been competitive. But the second they nominated, like, Don Bolduc, literally, there was no other way the seat could have went. And in Michigan District 3, they were like, we did this whole thing where it was like, they funded, like, this extremely far-right guy to run in this seat. And everybody was saying, like, if, like, this better not have blown over. Sure enough, it didn't blow over. It actually worked. They actually managed to get the Democrat in that time. And one other thing that, of course, we can't overlook is Roe v. Wade. Like, this was the thing that probably solidified the fact that this just truly wasn't the same election. Because, as I said before, like this is one of the big things. Like, Roe v. Wade was overturned. So, people now know that the threat of the GOP taking over and overturning Roe v. Wade legitimately was a thing. Like, there were even a lot of people who were thinking that New York could actually be competitive because Lee Zeldin was running on the idea that he would not do anything to stop abortion laws. But the thing is, they can't take that risk. Like, a lot of swing voters are starting to realize they can't take the risk anymore. They don't know what could actually be on the chopping block. Yeah, but enough about specifically just the partisan angle of this. Let's talk about a more ideological angle. How did progressives do this night? Well, not as well as we probably would have wanted. There are probably a couple of races that we felt that we probably would have wanted to flip blue. Like Mandela Barnes. Very long shot, people like Charles Booker or Gary Chambers. But we did pretty good, all things considered. We're definitely expanding. First, let's take a look at how many, true blue progressives did we have to begin with. Now, you know me, I'm very particular when it comes to, my progressives. So, when I say progressives, here's what I truly mean. I'm talking about people like Bernie, Markey, Merkley, Roe, Raoul, Pramila, Barbara Lee, Mark Pecan, Jamie Raskin, Earl Blumenauer, Jim McGovern, Jan Schakowsky, Mark Takano, Mark DeSalenur, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Elon Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Cory Bush, Jamal Bowman, Teresa Ligar Fernandez, Melanie Stansbury, Cherfalus McCormick, Chuy Garcia, Peter Welch, Peter DeFazio, Marie Newman, Andy Levin, John Yarmouth, and Monda Jones. So right off the bat, we have 30. Pretty decent number, all things considered. But we have to do some math, as some of them technically cannot count. DeFazio, Yarmouth, and Welch, all three retired from their seats this cycle. Levin, Jones, and Marie lost, so that removes 6 from contention, thus leaving 24. But how many other people ran? Okay, so Fetterman, Summer Lee, Greg Casar, Delia Ramirez, Jasmine Crockett, Jonathan Jackson, Becca Balint, Robert Garcia, Maxwell Frost, Wiley Nickel, Chris DeLuzio, and Peter Welch. As Welch, in retiring, announced that he would be running for the Senate seat. And due to the fact that he ran for a seat that isn't already held by a progressive, he will technically be added into the total. So that gives us a grand total of 36. But here is one more thing. I technically do have some other figures that other people might consider progressive, but I probably wouldn't for various reasons. But for the sake of them, I'll also be including them here. Those people would be the likes of Katie Porter, Sarah Jacobs, Richie Torres, Mike Levin, Gwen Moore, Joe Neguse, Nikema Williams, Kevin Mullen, Valerie Fushi, Morgan McGarvey, Jill Takuda, Val Hoyle, Sidney Kamlanger, and Shadi Thanadar. People that might be progressive on some issues or might identify as a progressive, might join the Progressive Caucus, might vote broadly progressive, but on the end of the day, at one point, they will toe a line that will be anti-progressive. That's an added 14, which gives us a grand total of 50. But again, technically, if we're adding the semi-progressives for this, we technically would also have to factor in other people that they replaced. Like, for example, Morgan McGarvey replaced John Yarmouth, so that's -1. Then Val Hoyle replaced Peter DeFazio, so that's -1. And Jill Takuda replaced Kai Kahele, that's -1. Sidney Kamlanger is replacing Karen Bass, which is -1 as well. So on election night, that gives us a grand total of 46. But Chuy Garcia is running for mayor, so I guess we'll technically have to -1, so 45. Generally, again, pretty good, but, we can do better, 100%. And now I guess we have to ask this question. What's next? Well, 2 things are next. For starters, Dem leadership. One of the big things that's going on is that now people are struggling to find out what leadership in the next congressional cycle is going to be. We're currently seeing Republicans kind of struggling to try and figure out if Kevin McCarthy will even be their speakership candidate come the next election. And now we're starting to hear some whispers of Democratic leadership starting to get into contention. Because many people have been saying that Democratic leadership, either way the way wind blows, Democratic leadership should be on its way out. These people are too old and we need new faces in the scene. And as such, it's go time. Figure out what leadership positions you can run for and run for them. Democratic leader, speaker if you manage to secure the slim majority, Democratic whip, Democratic caucus chair, assistant leader, Dem caucus vice chair. We're already seeing some of this stuff happen. The Democratic vice chair leadership is going to be very contentious already. And one of the people that I mentioned, Joe Neguse, has already announced that he will be running for the Democratic caucus chairmanship. We could have someone better, but he's definitely a good shot for that position. He's more in line with like the mainstream Democratic Party, so he could manage to get it. But here's the thing: the second that leadership position opens, find someone and put them in that position. Like many people were saying that was what that Ukraine letter that Pramila Jayapal sent was. That it was essentially going to be like just her gearing up for a leadership position. And I say go for it. Even if Pelosi wants to run for another term, I say go for it, 100%. It's time for new leadership. Progressives need to strike on that new leadership fast. They need to start announcing right now, like, we want this person to run for X. We want this person to vote for Y. Like, this is what they should be doing. Jayapal for speaker, Pecan for whip. I don't care. You guys need to be getting this done ASAP. And of course, we have to address one big elephant in the room. Possibly as soon as tomorrow, we will officially be beginning the 2024 presidential election. And that has propelled me to announce that next week, I will be unveiling a list that I've been teasing for a long time. The 10 progressives that I think should be our presidential nominee in 2024. Hope to see you there. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to know when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.